There was a guy, man. He lived down the road. His name was John Neil Mergerison. And this guy, I went to him once. I've been away for a couple of years, you know. I moved to the city, you know, and I came back. And I said, John Neil, how you doing? You know, I went to his what do you got, farm? And
yeah, that thing, yeah.
So he showed me his pigs. He had a bunch of pigs there, you know. He had a bunch of pigs, a bunch of them. And one of the pigs had a wooden leg, you know.
What?
Oh, yeah, a wooden leg. So I thought that was odd, you know. So I says to him, I says, John Neil, that's odd there. What's that pig? What's the story with that pig? So John Neil, he goes, oh, man, Norm, he says, that's a special pig. He goes, you wouldn't believe that pig. I go, yeah? What? Tell me about it. He goes, that pig, you wouldn't believe it. He says, last winter, you know, he goes, the house burned down. You know, you probably heard, the house burned down. And he says, me and the wife, we were sleeping on our bed. And he says, we never would have heard. We never would have heard. We never would have woken up. But he goes, that pig, he broke out of his pen. He ran all the way to the house. And he went up to the bedroom window, you know. He says he starts hitting his little snout on a window, you know. And he says, me and the wife, we woke up. And we got out, man, just in time. We escaped that inferno. He didn't use the word inferno. He's just a farmer.
But you threw that in there.
Yeah, he says we escaped that conflagration, you know. So I go, man, that's quite a story about the pig. He goes, oh man, it doesn't stop there. I go, really? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, just later after that, like the following summer, me and the wife were plowing in North 40, and our little boy, only 2 years old, man, fell into the well, and all alone, you know, and we no way we could do anything. We were plowing, and he says we didn't hear, you know, and he says, man, and we're getting older. We're probably not going to have another kid, you know. That kid means everything to us. I go, I know, John Neil, I know that. You don't have to tell me that. So I said, what happens? He goes, that's their very same pig. He says, he heard the child's wailing. He heard the child. He broke out of his pen. He ran all the way to the well. He looked down. There was the poor son of ours there, Billy, you know, down at the bottom of the well. He says, the pig, he took his snout there. He started pulling up on a rope. And the kid got right out, you know. And man, that's great, isn't it? I go, man, that's the greatest story I ever heard. Man, oh, what a pig. I said, what a pig that is. I said, one question, though, John Neil. I said, he got a wooden leg. I don't understand that part. Pig got a wooden leg over there. John Neil goes, man, he goes, what are you, crazy? He says, a great pig like that, you can't eat him all at once. You know, he said,
Mr. Abraham Lincoln, everybody.
Welcome, everyone, to Redoubt. What a great joke. Joining me today, we have Christian and John. Today, we're going to be talking about a number of items all around logic and how to use logic. And, of course, we all know who invented logic. John, who invented logic?
I didn't have it ready. I'm so bad.
Okay.
I'm so bad at this.
Stop screaming until you admit I invent logic.
That's been said, everyone. So before we get into that, though, Christian, how you doing today?
Doing well, man. Went to confession, went to church. Probably one of my favorite gospel readings today was John 2:13 through 22. Jesus drives all the money changers out of the temple. It's a good one.
Always relevant.
Yeah. So it was interesting to hear the priest homily about that today. So, but yeah, good day.
Fantastic. John, how are you?
I'm doing very well. I went to church this morning. Today the reading was on John 12:20 through 26, I want to say, which is essentially when the Gentiles, while Jesus is in Jerusalem, come up to speak to him, and Jesus says basically, whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, my servant will also be. My Father will honor the one who serves me, kind of laying the groundwork for opening up to more than just the Jews, right? Which is also a good passage, yeah. Very relevant to us in this day. But yeah, good day, good week. A little cold out right now, so I'm doubled up in my office.
Excellent. Yeah, it's today in North Carolina, it was 75 degrees. It was absolutely balmy.
What was the humidity?
It wasn't horrible, but it's too hot for this time of year.
Yeah.
I can take a couple days like this in the fall, but we've had 2 in a row, and I'm really starting to want the sweater weather back. So
Yeah.
It's okay. I'm sitting on the porch. It's getting a little bit cooler now, so it's.
What are you gonna do when winter rolls around? Are you gonna just take the security deposit hit and just smoke your
bundle
cigars
up, yeah.
inside? Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
I've got a pretty high tolerance to the cold, and I've got a little heater right here I
Yeah.
can use.
There you go.
Is anyone drinking? So I'm drinking some Jameson Black Barrel, which I've been sipping on for the last hour. It's decent. They say toasted oak, caramel, and spice. Although and vanilla, of course. I'm getting a lot of chocolate as well. So I don't know if anyone else has experienced that. But the Black Label Jameson is the choice drink tonight. Anyone else drinking anything more exciting than water?
I have a body armor. Does that count? Is that exciting?
I got this.
Hey, okay. So
So,
we got
yeah.
two non-water drinks, non-H2O.
Mhm.
All right, excellent. Well, I think we can jump right in. So let's see. Before we get into the clips, I wanted to talk through logical fallacies and some of the common pitfalls in usage in terms of how people talk about fallacies and use the fallacy concept as kind of an argument in and of itself in debate structure. And I see it done, and pretty much every single time it's done incorrectly. It's done with an apparent misunderstanding of what a logical fallacy is, which is frustrating when someone is clearly trying to beat someone else over the head with, logic and doing so poorly. So I guess first off, it's worth just reviewing a little bit some of the things we've talked about in the past. But there's a difference between building a case and making a deductive claim, right? Deductions are always going to be if-then statements. You can call them syllogisms is another term for it. But that is going to be a different thing than trying to build a case for something. So if you're in a courtroom and you're trying to build a particular case, you're going to pull in a lot of evidence, that some of which might be stronger evidence, some of it might be more relevant to the particular case you're making. But you're going to want to have a lot of evidence that is not directly relevant. It's not going to be a direct, like, because I'm showing you this particular slide, this guy is guilty. It's not going to be that direct, but you're going to be building a collection of evidence. And that's what we call inductive reasoning. You're making a broad case. So there's two different types of reasoning. And I would argue that there are also two different types of arguments, although traditionally the term argument has been reserved for deductive arguments formally, but then colloquially people will use the term argument to refer to both inductive and deductive arguments. And this is one of those areas of confusion that you actually see in a lot of these debates when people are, they think they're using the formal definition of argument, but they're actually they're talking about it in a way that is much more informal. So you can get a lot of confusion there. The thing about fallacies, when someone is talking about a logical fallacy or accusing someone else of using a logical fallacy, fallacies only apply, because they're logical fallacies, they only apply to the strict rules of logic. In other words, deduction. Logic, it goes with deduction and syllogisms. Again, these are all just the exact same concept, just three different words: logic, deduction, syllogism. You can't accuse someone of a logical fallacy when they are making an inductive argument. You can only accuse them of the particular piece of evidence that they brought up is not particularly relevant or particularly conducive to their argument. You can say that, but you can't say that it's a fallacy, because fallacies only apply to deductive arguments. Now, in practice, deductive and inductive arguments are often used in the same sentence. You will be using a combination of the two, and so you might be able to poke holes in some of the deductions that they're making on the basis of what they're bringing onto the table. But you just have to be careful when you accuse someone of a fallacy. Very often, it's not a correct application of that term. And so let's think of some examples. So I guess before I jump into that, John, does that make sense at all, or are you?
Well,
I would ask
for a little bit of a clarification. So when you say logical fallacies are only to be used in the confines of like a pure logical discussion, do you mean that, like, if we're having discussion about something and you pull something up and I'm like, oh, that's a fallacy of whatever it might be, right? You're like, well, that's not really what we're talking about here. Or are you saying that I'm misapplying a fallacy? Am I using a fallacy purely as a defense mechanism?
Basically,
Like
it depends
what?
on how I am trying to use a particular piece of evidence. If I'm using it in an if-then statement, oversimplified fallacy. If I am using making an if-then claim, and I do so in a way that violates the rules of logic, which are all built on the law of non-contradiction. So in other words, if I'm making a statement that then does not necessarily follow from if, or from the collection of ifs, right? Usually there's a set of premises, and then must necessarily follow because of the law of non-contradiction.
Go ahead. I was gonna say, I think I've seen this in like sort of a meme format where it's like you're at your doctor's and he's like, hey, according to this scan, you have stage 4 cancer. And the guy's like, appeal to authority fallacy.
Right, yeah,
It's like, well, yeah, but
Yeah.
that's not really relevant here.
Right. Yes. In that case, the doctor is making an appeal to authority, or the authority of the scan, but he's not saying that because of this image necessarily you have cancer. He's saying based on a number of things, inductively, it would be most likely that you have cancer. I mean, that is an inductive claim, and so yes, you could say that's a fallacy, but you would be misusing that term unless the doctor was claiming that it necessarily followed. If he was claiming that this is, a syllogism,
because Jim said you had cancer and he's a doctor, you have cancer. It's like,
right.
Well,
that
no.
would be an appeal to authority fallacy. Exactly. So Christian asked you to look up a list of kind of fallacies. We can go through some other examples. What are some others that we have?
Sure. So ad hominem, attacking one's character rather than the issue.
So yeah, great example. You could basically, if you're saying that because
this doesn't work on women, right? If they're like, well, you smell bad, you can't be ad hominem fallacy.
Maybe you can. If you are saying that, if so and so beats his wife, then he is wrong on this political issue. That would be an ad hominem fallacy, right? You are saying that someone who beats his wife cannot necessarily be correct on a political issue. That's simply not true. You could still manage to somehow be right on an issue, even if you are a horrible scumbag person. So that would be an example of an ad hominem fallacy. But most of the time, when someone is using ad hominem, it's again part of a larger case. They're saying, look, you should not trust any of the things that this person is saying because he has poor character. One example of that poor character is the fact that he beats his wife. That you cannot say that that's an ad hominem fallacy. That is a perfectly correct statement, logically following a statement. It has the correct qualifiers to make it true enough, because you're saying this is possibly true, things like that. You're not saying that it necessarily follows, and so you actually can't attack that as being an ad hominem fallacy. And so it depends on how you are using a particular argument. And again, the fallacy criticism only works if someone is saying that something necessarily follows as or otherwise would violate the law of non-contradiction. And we've got a number of clips. I think the three that I pulled are all from Jay Dyer, where he will just kind of call someone out. And this is a very big thing on the Orthodox. All the Orthobros do this. I think they learned it from Jay, but it might just be an organic thing. But they will all just, randomly in an argument, someone else is making a point. Again, they're trying to build a case. And they'd be like, appeal to authority fallacy, or ad hominem, or incredulity fallacy. They'll just throw out a fallacy. It's like, wait a second. The person wasn't making a syllogistic argument. The person was just trying to build a case and pointing out one little piece of their case. And so you just got to be careful. And that is, it's bad argumentation. I won't say bad faith because that requires intent, but it's just, it's not persuasive to me, and it shouldn't be persuasive to anyone who understands the rules of logic and how to talk. It's I guess, good debating if you just want to score points, but it's not good for trying to actually get at truth.
I think that's a lot of it too, is that this is essentially online Christian blood sports a lot of the time. And if you can just insert fallacy, that your opponent is making like on a generic level, right, you win points, right?
Right.
And then it also is a great debate tactic because then it flusters them. Then instead of pushing forward, then they have to defend that point itself, and then they have to backtrack and move around. So it's a great little tool to disrupt your enemy's flow. And it's about winning. It's about winning. It's not about like a discussion or coming to some sort of truth claim. Yeah,
exactly. So if you are ever in an argument and someone just throws that attack at you, because I have noticed it works. It tends to work. People get stumped like, did I commit a fallacy? And they stop their train of thought, and then they have to reassess. And then the person who accused them of committing a fallacy is then in the upper hand. And it's like, it's almost never a fair attack. And so just recognize that now you don't have to be stumped. You don't even have to really engage. You can simply sidestep it by saying, look, you're acting like I'm making some kind of a syllogistic argument. And I'm not saying that there aren't syllogisms involved in what I'm saying, but that point right there can stand, regardless. We can just leave that thing that I said about so-and-so's character, or about such and such an authority, or about whatever, about the slippery slope. That's another great example. If you're saying that because this happened, necessarily, because we allow for gay marriage, necessarily we're going to legalize pedophilia in 30 years. That is a slippery slope fallacy. However, simply pointing out the fact that, hey, we've seen this kind of degradation over time, this trend might continue, that's simply an inductive argument. That's building a case, and that is totally allowed. That is not a fallacy. And so, this is really, really important for having reasonable conversations in general, but certainly online where this kind of thing gets thrown around.
Yeah, I mean, with that one specifically, that's always the funny one, because I remember that was harped on for so long. Oh, it's a logical fallacy. It's a slippery slope. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And then it's like, well, it's kind of happening, and they're pushing for all sorts of wacky things, and you can kind of tell where it stems from, right? There's like almost a perfect point in time where it stems from.
Yes, and the one case where it's the least fallacious would be when you are pointing to the past. Like a lot of times you're talking about these things that were slippery slopes, or someone will say, oh, that's a slippery slope. And it's like, no, it's already happening. We've already we've slid down the slope. At that point,
it's not a slippery slope because there's
just history.
Evidence. Yeah. There's evidence to point to the decline. It's like consult the graph. You see it moving in a downward direction, Right. We can draw some logical conclusions from that.
But if you were trying to, a slippery slope is essentially, it's just extrapolation from the data. Which we do all the time, and that's totally allowed.
Well, but it could be from a single data point.
I suppose it could.
I could just say that, because you ate dinner today and you had a big dinner, you're going to be 100 pounds overweight by next year or something like that. Yeah. Right.
I mean, that's more of just like a non sequitur, but I guess.
Well, right, but it's from a singular data point, right? So, gay marriage gets legalized. Oh, well, in 10 years they're going to be marrying dogs or whatever it's going to be, right? But if I show you, well, actually they push for this XYZ over a 10-year span, if you gained 10 pounds a month, and I said, well, hey, James, for the last 6 months, you've been gaining 10 pounds a month. I think by next year, you're going to be 100 pounds overweight. Right. Well,
again, that still wouldn't mean that would be, it would be a fair extrapolation perhaps, but it wouldn't be a logical necessity, right? And so it would still be a fallacy if you tried to make that strong of a claim. But if you simply were just building a case from saying, hey, I think we can extrapolate, not a fallacy. And just to your point about like one data point, this is another thing that gets thrown around online all the time is people's standard for what counts as evidence. People will be like, oh, that's not evidence. You can't say that that's evidence about whatever. And I'm almost never willing to make that criticism. I'm willing to allow I will admit any evidence to the table and then just point out that it's completely irrelevant or it's bad evidence, it's weak evidence in terms of how it would communicate your argument. But for example, I'm going to be fat in 3 years because I had an extra helping of dessert or whatever, that is valid evidence. You can bring that to the table. It's not good evidence. It's very weak evidence. However, if I had been doing that for the last 3 years and you were looking to the next 3 years, then maybe that could be some good evidence. Or you see, the morbidly obese person having a salad and saying that they're in great shape, then there's some pretty strong evidence against their claim. So you can, but what you bring to the table is, in terms of evidence, there's not much that makes something not evidence. It's just weak evidence. It's just degrees of evidence. So I hear people say that a lot, especially atheists will make this claim. Atheists will talk about, well, that's not evidence. Like, bring me evidence for God. What's your evidence for God? And then you'll say something that'll be like you'll make an argument from morality, like the existence of, hey, people do nice things for other people, or people seem to be moral. People seem to have an idea of morality that is not purely relative. And they'd be like, well, that's not evidence. They're like, okay, yes, it is. What is your standard of evidence? What counts as evidence to you? And a lot of times with atheists, it's just sort of empirical evidence. They're only willing to allow for scientific evidence, which is just scientism, which ends up being a completely nonsensical worldview. But just dismissing actual evidence as not being evidence is also not a good argument. Give me 1 second.
I think your dog wants in. Yeah.
It's like, please,
Yep.
please get me out of here.
Too logical. Well, she's a woman. She couldn't take the heat.
She wouldn't get it. Yeah.
Genetic fallacy.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, you want to get into the first clip?
Yes. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So this is Atheist Empiricist versus Jay Dyer and Father Deacon Ananias.
That's a young Jay Dyer right there. Wow.
Yeah, I always forget that Jay Dyer's like heading towards 50.
Is he really?
Pretty sure.
Wow.
So he's been Orthodox for a decade.
Mm-hmm.
He converted to Catholicism in his mid-20s, and he was Catholic for a decade. So, this might be some sort of fallacious argumentation here, but I believe, if my math is correct, the extrapolation is he is at least 45.
Okay.
Epistemic position based on all kinds of assumptions. So you're
And
assuming
that proposition, can that actually be experienced and tested and observed in empirical data? The proposition that you just said.
Do I experience things?
No, I didn't ask that. I said the
And
proposition.
yet I experience things, and I can extrapolate
No, I didn't
things,
say
and so
that.
that's how
Listen,
I give rise to what I
that
do.
proposition.
Dude, you need to let people finish.
Can you pause it, John?
You need to let people finish.
Actually, I might actually share this one. I might drive on this one because I've got several places I want to pause. Might just be easier. Let me
Take that
over. Just for context, this is like there's at least 3 people on Jay's side and then 1 person calling in. So it's a little hard to distinguish who's who, but you'll get it after about a minute. But yeah, it's like Jay and at least 2 other people, and then this one atheist that calls in. Okay, so what I want to do is just play the clip. You guys are welcome to pause it if you want to. But what I have in mind is just listen to the whole thing. It's only about 5 minutes long. Okay, 6 minutes. And then we can listen to it again. This one's important enough where I want to do it twice, and we can kind of pick it apart in the second run through. But I want to just get the full conversation because it's so short, and there's the back and forth is really helpful. If you pause it a bunch, you're going to miss out on really what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
All right, can you guys
position
hear it?
based on all kinds of assumptions.
Audio's coming through?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
So you're
And
assuming
that proposition, can that actually be experienced and tested and observed in empirical data? The proposition that you just said.
Do I experience things?
No, I didn't ask that. I said the
And
proposition.
yet I experience things, and I can extrapolate
No, I didn't
things,
say
and so
that.
that's how
Listen,
I give rise to what I
that
do.
proposition.
Dude, you need to let people finish.
Hold on.
You need to let people finish, dude.
Hold on. So you're expressing naive empiricism, which is a philosophical position on knowledge and knowing objects in the world. It includes all kinds of presuppositions, and they've been teased out countless times by many philosophers like David Hume. So all we're doing is asking you to tease out and give an account for the position that you have in terms of epistemology. And he gave a rebuttal that the very position itself, the phrase, I know what I know according to my, sense data, or however you phrased it, what matches up to my senses and sense data. That phrase itself can't be known by sense data. So that's a classic just critique of empiricism.
Yeah, I guess if you want me to say that I have to hedge my bets on some things which have to be true even though their truth is unknowable, I would have to just shrug and say, okay.
Then you have no argument.
Then you don't have an argument.
I wouldn't have an argument against whether or not it's knowable. I can have
About
arguments, though.
anything.
No, you don't have an argument for anything at all.
Is it not possible to form arguments off of necessarily unjustified presuppositional beliefs?
No,
No.
you can't. That's
exactly. Then how do you?
So
are you saying that you are without?
Just ask
Wait,
me.
hang on.
I have some presuppositional beliefs in which everything that I'm about to argue is dependent upon, but I don't have to justify that.
Wait, why don't you have to justify them?
That's your position. You just gave back.
Stating your position, dude.
I'm stating your position back to you. And
Okay, good.
Now, notice how they're using the term justification. It's similar to what we were talking about earlier, where it kind of like argument has a different colloquial use and a formal use. as I can understand it, when they are talking about justification, they are referring to deductive justification. They are referring to a kind of justification that leads to necessary truth. So just keep that in mind.
So we're on the exact same page now.
If that's the case, you can't critique us, and we can just say we don't have to justify.
Yeah, what I'm trying to illustrate is what you
over.
just said. It was that position, and that means there is no argument. You're literally saying I'm going to say a bunch of things based on a bunch of other things that I don't have to. I just made a bet on.
If that argument contradicts experience, then it doesn't matter what you presuppose.
Now you're back to
question. We're asking for a justification that you can trust your senses, and you just keep saying my senses.
That's presupposed.
Yeah, we're asking for
the reliability of senses is a presupposition that I know is unjustifiable.
Asking for a justification for a belief in the principle itself, and you're saying I don't have to.
Well, for belief itself, I mean, the first belief that I have is that I'm capable of belief. Next question.
If you're going to be consistent, then we're just going to say, okay, you're going to get annoyed when we just accept that standard and say, okay, we don't need to justify our belief in God. Okay, next question.
Well, the issue is then, the more important question would be then, what is God?
We don't have to give an answer for that next question. It's presupposed. Do you see how that doesn't work to critique or to give argument?
Is God just any presupposition whatsoever?
No.
Then what is God?
Do you see what I'm pointing out? Do you see what I'm pointing out?
Can we do it? Let's do one person at a time.
Go ahead.
So are you saying that presuppositions are necessarily unquestionable as well? That even if they are unjustified, we can't question, even if we know that they were justifiable and unadopted, that we can't question them?
Hush for a second, please. So we're not saying that presuppositions are unjustified. We're asking you for a justification. That's all we're doing. We believe
presuppositions are definitionally unjustifiable, though.
No, that's not true.
Problem.
You're totally wrong. We completely disagree with that. So you don't know what you're talking about. That's what.
How do you justify a presupposition?
By the impossibility contrary, by showing that it's a necessary precondition for the possibility of knowledge. This is what transcendental arguments are. That's what we do here.
Oh, this is the transcendental argument? Hang on. There's a paper. I'm trying to remember what it is. I know that there's a name, and I know that there's a paper that basically all but demonstrated the impossibility of a transcendence arguments.
If you want, so I'm not interested in the fact that you knew of a paper one time. Do you have arguments that you want to make? Because we just critiqued your basic empiricism, and you're saying I don't have to give an account for empiricism. Okay, then why? Then I don't have to give an account for theism, and you don't have an argument.
Well, the issue is that if we are to try to account for theism, you'd have to demonstrate the necessity of what you term God. That is, you have to define God for me so that I can determine whether or not I find that to be a necessary thing for the universe.
Yeah, but I don't have to do that if you've just admitted that nobody has to justify their presuppositions.
I said that presuppositions are unjustifiable. That does not mean that there can be presuppositions that are wrong.
I just said we don't have to justify our presuppositions. So
that doesn't preclude them from the possibility of being wrong.
Okay, so then what's your criteria for determining the true and the false?
Non-contradiction is a good start.
Yeah. So, and how do you justify logic? Well, you're going to say it's what appeals, what matches up to reality, right? Is it also an empirical thing?
Logic is probably going to be extrapolated from the way that we experience things. Yes.
Yeah, so that's what you said in the first proposition, which you couldn't justify. So now you're back to another circle.
The only thing that I can justify is that I have experience, and all things else are going to be sort of extrapolated from there.
You can't even justify that. That's why you keep not understanding the question.
Well, it's because it's kind of self-evident that I have experience.
Okay, then it's self-evident that God exists. If you can appeal to self-evident,
what is God?
It doesn't matter, because all I have to do, if you can do that in the debate, I can do that in the debate. So
wait, what is God though? Because I can describe what experience is.
No,
if you want me to. I can't.
You just said no, you can't. Are you aware of the problems of empiricism in terms of like the external world, in terms of
I'm literally a high school dropout. You're gonna have to drop down to like kid language for me. Sorry.
We're gonna move on. This is stupid.
Alrighty. How every J Dyer debate is. So, before we go again, because, oh man, it was hard to listen to that without jumping in a bunch, but I told myself I wouldn't. thoughts overall?
Yeah. So this is like if you listen to enough Jay Dyer, this is going to be something that comes up all of the time. So I've heard a version of this argument probably 20 different times, right? So this is a very, very foundational worldview question, basically. So if you say, okay, I'm an empiricist, I only believe in sense data, whatever, it's like, how can you ground that? He essentially gives up that he can't ground that. He can't provide what they're looking for, like an epistemic justification for that, some sort of grounding for that. He gives them that, right, to try and move along with the debate, and they aren't going to let him, right? Because as soon as he gives up that, they're just going to say, we have, impossibility of the contrary, therefore I can use tag, because I can provide you with the justification, albeit complicated, right? I don't have to engage with you at all, right? Because you admitted that your worldview has no foundation, no justification, and mine does. So literally any argument you make isn't justified, doesn't have any sort of foundation, doesn't have, like, you can't even move forward with that, right? They're not going to allow you to either.
Right. So and a lot of it comes down to how they're using justified, because and this is where the atheist doesn't fully know how to argue for his position, but he doesn't actually need to grant the fact that his position has no justification. It's just he is buying into the use of the term justification, meaning proof. It doesn't have any deductive proof, and that's why he says that presuppositions by definition are unjustifiable, and he is correct if that is how he's using the term justification. He is absolutely 1000%. That is the definition of a presupposition. And what's funny is that Jay should agree with that. Jay either doesn't understand how logic works, or he is being dense, or there's one other possibility, which I think is the correct one, and we can jump to that in a second. But basically, Jay, it seems, is operating from the same understanding of the term justification, that it is deductive proof. So
I think his argument is essentially that there is a impossibility to the contrary, right?
Exactly.
So he has excluded everything else, and the only solution that grounds actual knowledge and truth is God, right?
Right.
That's the only way that you can even know anything.
Exactly. Which is just another presupposition. It just moves the goalpost in a couple key ways. One, you could simply state it in a simple statement that God is a necessary condition for logic. Logic exists, therefore God, right? That's a fine kind of linear view of it, but now you've just made your presupposition that is unjustified. The initial statement, God is a necessary precondition for logic. Okay, so that could be your postulate, and if you're going to try to argue for that logically, you're going to end up spinning your wheels and probably going in circles, or you just accept that as a unjustified postulate. But that's not what Jay does. Jay will say that he does that, but that's not actually what he does. What he really does, in terms of his actual epistemology, it's relying on what you said, the reductio ad absurdum, the reducing everything else to absurdity, or showing the impossibility of the contrary, which is never going to be a positive proof for your position. The only way that this works logically, and works something as a positive proof, is if you have a discrete number of ideas, or we'll call them worldviews, because that's usually
right. If you could eliminate 3 out of 4, then the last one remaining would be correct.
A, B, C, and D, and you show that A, B, and C are all wrong, then D is all that's left. That's how reductio ad absurdum can function as a positive proof. But now, again, you've shifted the goalpost, because now you have to get your opponent to admit, and you have to provide justification for why your grouping of all possible worldviews into simply A, B, C, and D is correct, right? One of those, D in this case, being the Christian God, right? I mean, this is how they'll talk. They'll say, well, there's only really about 7, or I don't know the exact number, but this many groupings of worldviews. And so as long as I can show that all of these other 6 are internally inconsistent, then mine is left. And that is, I don't have an issue with that form of argumentation, but don't act like that is a positive, logical, necessary proof for God, because now you've still made a number of unjustified claims. You've claimed that your groupings are correct, and you've claimed that Yeah, a couple things. It's not just the groupings. You've claimed that your groupings are correct and that they are MECE. They are mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. Meaning, if you have a Venn diagram, the entire area of the diagram takes up or includes all possible worldviews, and they're mutually exclusive. So the two circles are not overlapping at all. They are two discrete, non-overlapping worldviews. You have to show that that's what you're dealing with these A, B, C, and D in order for that to be anything close to a positive proof for your position D. And again, you're going to run into certain things. You're just going to run into presuppositions there. So you've just moved the goalpost from your presupposition being God, which is what presuppositionalists are supposed to have that as their presupposition, is that God exists, and that we know God by Scripture. That's supposed to be the presupposition. They've just shifted it back because they're trying to justify what they call their presupposition with other logical arguments that will again require justification themselves. So now they've undercut their own argument, which is why they will start to argue for why it's okay to be circular. It's okay to be fallaciously circular, because they recognize that we've called this thing our postulate, but we're arguing deductively for it. Therefore, we have to really argue in a circle, and that's got to be okay because everyone does that. And again, that's just a bad argument, because you're now violating the very rules that you say that you're living by and trying to use to prove the rest of your argument. And the only thing that Jay can say to the circle accusation, the circle criticism, is that he's operating at a different level. That, at a meta level, once you're talking about meta logic, then it's okay to violate logic. Right, then it's okay to go against the law of non-contradiction. Then it's like that is a metaphor for what he's trying to do, but that's not actually a concrete, precise claim of why this particular zone, this level that he's operating in, is practically different. He doesn't justify that claim itself. So it comes across as special pleading, and I think probably is special pleading, which is another fallacy where you're basically saying, well, just grant me this fallacy, grant me this one time where then doesn't follow from if necessarily, and then everything else works. And again, normally I would say criticizing someone as being fallacious is incorrect, but in this case, Jay is actually making a syllogistic argument and using both a circular reasoning and an example of special pleading. So that's there's a lot of criticism there. As I can tell, they're all legit criticisms, and Jay has never adequately defended it. He will say kind of one-liners that people in the streams don't necessarily know how to go against, but they come across as sophistry. They come across just talking points. They're just sort of ways that he has gotten people to shut up. But they don't actually get around the pretty fundamental issues in his reasoning.
Now, can I postulate an alternative, right? Try and steelman it from their side. Can you provide an alternative or some sort of grounding or justification from an atheistic worldview?
From an atheistic worldview?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. I don't think atheists have much. I mean, so you can... It depends on what you mean by grounding, because again, that's kind of another metaphor. Jay never really explains what he means by grounding. He also doesn't really clearly explain what he means by
I think he's using grounding and justification mostly like interchangeably, and that's kind of how I'm using them.
So in that case, no, atheists cannot ground their beliefs in the sense that they cannot prove their presuppositions, because no one can. No one can prove a presupposition by definition. So, yeah, atheists can't.
There would be a way to prove it, right? If you could actually prove everything else impossible.
Sure. Yes, I suppose
right.
that
so
it's still not a positive proof, but a theoretical.
Well, let's take away the positive proof. So let's say I were a betting man, and I could remove every other worldview that attempts to give itself justification other than the Christian God. Right? I can't be 100% certain. Well, let's say I'm 95%.
Now you've given me
confidence.
the entire board, though, because this is my whole thing: is you can be very, very confident that you're correct, but you will never reach a point of total epistemic certitude. And once you've allowed for any percentage, once you've allowed for any possible positions that you haven't countered, then you've actually you've given the whole game, and now you are making an argument from most likely. What is the most likely reading of the data? Which Jay will say that he's not doing.
I'm personally changing the argument to make it more palatable to somebody who is like sensitive to a logical fallacy, right?
Okay.
So rather than telling an atheist, like, let's just pretend I'm in a debate with somebody and I'm like, yeah, I can't 100% justify this, but I'm like 95% there, whereas you're at 0%. So I like my odds a lot better than yours, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I think there's a way to do the same thing without making the claims that Jay does.
Yeah. I mean, and I would use that kind of argumentation. I think that's totally fine. I think that I think Christianity is absolutely the best explanation of the available data. I think it makes the most sense, and it answers the most questions. There's a couple internal things that still are left uncertain, that still don't quite jive, but on the whole, it works, and it does seem to provide a reason for the order that we see in the world, right? The idea of God does answer why we have an ordered universe. And that's a pretty big question, and so it's nice to have an answer for it. However, we cannot logically justify why we believe in God.
Well, I don't want to get into that argument again, because we've kind of talked back and forth with that. Because if you make an absolute statement like that, do you have justification for absolute statements, right? I don't want to get back into that, because that was fun, but I don't want to do another 30 minutes of that.
Well, I know, but I do have the correct answer to that I didn't have at the time. I wrote it down later.
Okay, you're like, damn it, I gotta pull this up.
Well, I realized that I do need to have an answer for that, because it's one of those things that, people, actually one of the clips later, Jay uses that exact line against the person he's talking to, and it stumps that person. And it's like, I know there's an answer to this. I just, it's an argument at such a fundamental level that if you haven't thought about how to phrase the response, it can get a little tricky. But basically, let's see. I'll write this down. So, right. So the question is, like, how can you know something? And, even if you say you can't know anything with certainty. And the answer is that you can know it on the base. I said this in the stream, but you can know it on the basis of your presuppositions. So, if I'm saying that all knowledge is based on faith, meaning you have to build knowledge on the basis of certain presuppositions, and those presuppositions can't be logically proven by definition, therefore you have to accept them by faith, then you can know something on the basis of those presuppositions, but you have to first account for those presuppositions. So, for example, Hume makes the argument that we can't know that the sun will rise tomorrow, and I think that's true. We cannot, with epistemic certitude, know that the sun will rise tomorrow. We certainly can't know simply on the basis of induction and the fact that it's risen for the last 100 years. Jay would agree with this. We can't make the claim that the sun will rise tomorrow simply based on our even scientific research into things like gravity and whatnot. We have no way of epistemically certainly knowing that those rules are going to stay in place, because we have no way, from pure science, of knowing why there should be any order to the world at all. Even the fact that we've observed order in the past doesn't necessitate the continuance of that. However, one can make a series of inferences or logical steps based on certain presuppositions. So, core of my presupposition, I believe in God, therefore, I think that God put in place these rules, one of which is gravity, which seems to govern the heavenly bodies, which seems to operate regularly and has operated regularly. And the fact that there is some regularity to it is also in keeping with what our understanding of God as being one who creates order and is likes order. And so I can know about as well as I can know anything that the sun will rise again tomorrow on the basis of those presuppositions and logical steps. So that's how we can know things. We can know things on the basis of certain presuppositions, but that still leaves the presuppositions open to question. And in this case, my ultimate presuppositions are always going to be God or Scripture. Those are going to be the ultimate things that are always left open to question. I can build a case for them inductively, like we've been talking about, but those are always going to be open to question. But from those, I can know everything that I do know. And that's still knowledge without certainty. And so to simply say what Jay will say, or I think what you were implying in the last stream that we had this discussion, is that being certain of nothing means that you can't know anything. We have to make sure we understand what
I think
we
it
mean
is.
by know.
It is about like justification or grounding, right? So, for instance, if I asked you, Jay, are you a chair? You could only say, I'm not sure.
I think Jay would agree with that. Again, at least in terms of just based on his experiential knowledge. The only way that Jay could say anything else is based on his belief in God, which is the same as what I'm saying.
Well, right. So I think that the transcendental argument, it's a foundation, right? So everything starts from this transcendent category, which is God, right? So before you even get logic, you have God before then, right? So for me, it would be more difficult because, like you said, to prove every other possibility not possible. Whereas I don't know if I personally have even the ability to disprove every other possibility, right, within my own human limited landscape, right? I would still use that as a argument for true objective knowledge, for some sort of justification or grounding. But the way that Jay uses it, like you said, it does still rest upon certain beliefs, right?
It either rests on certain like self-evident truths, which Jay isn't willing to admit that he's using, or it's a productive ad absurdum argument. It is not a which means that he is again assuming that he has found a mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive set of worldviews, of which his is the only one that works out. Which again still isn't really a positive proof, but is the closest you can get. And so that will always be an argument to the most possible or the most probable explanation of the data. But Jay is just not willing to be honest that that's what's happening.
Could I kind of point that though? So if I could, within my human rational mind, actually exclude every other possibility, right? If I had that ability, wouldn't that necessitate that tag, therefore God is true, right?
Yes, but the question is, how would you know?
So it could be a positive
that you had.
Well, right.
It still wouldn't be positive by definition, but it would they would converge, right? It's like two infinite things. They would have reached the same point. But then the question is, how do you know with epistemic certitude that you have excluded every other possible correct answer? And that's
could you say to every possibility, to everything within my faculty that I could have epistemic certitude, I do, right? Like within the limits of my own rational mind, there is nothing else that could explain this, right?
I suppose I'm a little confused about how you're using epistemic certitude, but sure, within the confines of your finite, which you have to admit is finite understanding, you have shown everything you can think of. Everything else doesn't work. I mean, I've basically done this myself, right? I mean, everything that I can think of, none of it seems to answer the fundamental questions that is answered by God. So I've done this, but I have to recognize that as a finite being, that does not give me, logical justification for saying that this is necessarily true. I mean, that would actually be an incredulity fallacy. Because
I was going to say, because if
I understand nothing else, therefore,
Well, I was going to say that relies on your own sense data, so that kind of goes down to empiricism as well, right? Where you're like, I can't figure out anything else, but you're still relying on your own abilities, your own cognition for that. Yeah.
So, all right, I know this is going to be painful, but let's listen to it one more time. I really think it'll be fruitful because we can actually pick it apart a little bit more with the context of this conversation.
This is way beyond my wheelhouse. I'm just a simplistic individual. I'm doing my best to absorb as much as I can, but I don't see the productivity in it in arguing.
I was talking to my brothers earlier today. Same thing. Yeah, they're exactly the same, where they're just like, I don't
necessarily think it's important for us to argue. I think it is super useful against atheists that try and tell you anything.
That's a whole epistemic position.
Sorry.
Because anytime you ask them what grounds their ability, if they go to sense data, like this guy does, usually it's really easy. I wouldn't go to the tag argument because that's very complicated and that I don't fully understand it, right? So like Jay can do that. That's his thing. But I would just ask them if their sense data is always correct. They would say no, and then I'm like, well, then that's not a great foundation. That's not a great starting point, right? You're already admitting that your starting point is faulty. or can be faulty, right?
Sure.
Go
All
ahead,
right.
James.
Based on all kinds of assumptions. So you're
And
assuming
that proposition, can that actually be experienced and tested and observed in empirical data? The proposition that you just said.
Do I experience things?
No, I didn't ask that. I said the
Yet
proposition
I experience
that you
things and I can extrapolate
No, I didn't
things,
say
and so
that.
that's how
Listen,
I give rise to what I do.
that proposition.
Dude, you need to let people finish.
Hold on.
You need to let people finish, dude.
Hold on. So you're expressing naive empiricism, which is a philosophical position on knowledge and knowing objects in the world. It includes all kinds of presuppositions, and they've been teased out countless times by many philosophers like David Hume. So all we're doing is asking you to tease out and give an account for the position that you have in terms of epistemology. And he gave a rebuttal that,
which again, all Hume ends up showing in his philosophy is that we cannot know anything certainly, that induction does not function with the same level of certitude that deductions do. That's Hume. That is not the same thing as saying that inductions provide no justification. In other words, it would be one thing to claim that because I see, a bug or whatever, what I think is a bug, that I know with absolute certainty that there is a bug in front of my face. That's a very different claim from saying that it would appear to me from a number of different angles and perspectives, and the fact that I got my buddy here to come and see the bug as well, and you can do all these different ways of checking. It would be my most probable guess that there's a bug right here. Those are two very different claims, and at no point does Hume ever say that that latter claim is invalid or unreasonable. He's just saying that you can't make a claim and call it and raise it to the level of geometric necessity from pure induction. That's Hume, and he's right.
the very position itself, the phrase, I know what I know according to my, sense data, or however you phrased it, what matches up to my senses and sense data. That phrase itself can't be known by sense data. So that's a classic just critique of empiricism.
Yeah, I guess if you want me to say that I have to hedge my bets on some things which have to be true even though their truth is unknowable, I would have to just shrug and say, okay.
Then you have no argument.
Then you don't have an argument.
I wouldn't have an argument.
So, I mean, that again makes no sense. Go ahead, John.
So I get it though, right? Because essentially in this debate, you're giving up, right? You're giving up the position, right? So if you're on a chessboard or whatever it might be, and you're saying, okay, well, the way that you're framing this, I can't justify completely my beliefs or whatnot. They are
completely
just going
being
to
the key word there.
Well, right, but what I'm saying is they will just assert that they can, and then take the position, right, that their claims are justified, and not allow you to move because you can't justify your position. So it's like, for instance, if you you don't have full certainty of anything, right? I can ask you if you're a chair, and you don't be like, you don't know though. I know you don't, right? So I can make fun of you. Right now, this is in a sphere where you're on the back foot. So as a debate tactic, it's very
I get
good.
how it works as a debate tactic, but imagine, so in terms of a getting to truth tactic, imagine if you're in a court case and one lawyer, is asked, can you say with absolute epistemic certitude that your client did not kill anyone? He says, well, no, of course I can make that claim. I can build my case. I can show you all these reasons why this seems like the most plausible explanation for the data and the evidence. But no, I can't make that claim. And then the other lawyer says, got him. Okay, I can. I say absolutely 1,000%. I know for certain that he killed him. And then doesn't provide any supporting information. But that's, he makes that claim. Or even if he does provide supporting information, I think clearly that would not be accepted in a courtroom. But this is basically that is a fair analogy, because what Jay is saying is that simply because you can't say that you are certain about anything means that you cannot make any even probabilistic claims about anything. Just because you're not certain about everything doesn't means you can't make any claims about anything. And I just that would mean that no lawyer has ever made an argument ever, because he says you have no argument. It's like, well, what do you mean by argument? Because every argument that I've ever heard in my lifetime has been built has had some amount of built-in uncertainty, and yet they'll still make the arguments. And the reason there's built-in uncertainty is because every argument rests on certain presuppositions, which have no certain justification.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this is more Jay's realm of debate, right? The sort of foundational type stuff, right? Epistemology. They're not debating on tax policy, right? Or something where you can operate with margins of uncertainty, but you can deduce, right? You can bring in inferences, you can do all of this sort of stuff. But this foundation level argument, like literally the founding, the building blocks of knowledge, right? This is where this argument is really the only place that it even comes into play. Because yeah, you're right. You couldn't have this sort of argument about anything, right? What do you want to eat for dinner? It's like, well, you don't have any justification for why you want to eat. You're not even sure. It's like, it doesn't make sense. Like this isn't applicable to this situation. But again,
in order for it to be applicable,
specifically an atheist, right, who wants to make some sort of claim against God for you,
you can do the tu quoque, which is fine. But again, to simply browbeat him over something that really Jay doesn't have a better position either, because again, and this is why I find it so disingenuous. I mean, yes, you can browbeat an atheist for not knowing, but Jay makes the claim that simply lacking certainty, which again, I would argue that Jay does as well, even if he claims that he doesn't, but put that aside for a second. Jay is making the claim, just to use Jay's own sort of language here, Jay is making the claim that because this person lacks certainty, he has no argument. That claim itself, from Jay's perspective, should require justification. The idea that you can make no arguments at all, no claims at all, without absolute certainty, that needs its own justification. We hear something amounting to justification in one of the later clips, where basically says that so you get into this infinite regress where someone asks you, hey, do you know that you aren't sure about anything? And you say, no, I'm not sure about that. You say, okay, well, are you sure about that? And you say, no, I'm not sure about that. Well, are you sure about that? No, I'm not sure about that. And you get this infinite regress of uncertain statements. And the fact that it's an infinite regress is what Jay, or maybe the person that Jay had on, says invalidates that line. And that, again, requires some justification, because that doesn't necessarily follow. Like, I could tell you to count to infinity, and you can start counting to infinity, and simply the fact, oh, you're never going to get there, means that infinity doesn't exist. That doesn't follow. Simply because you could keep doing this thing over and over and over means that it's fallacious or has some issue. Because again, the person's simply claiming uncertainty. So demonstrating that they are uncertain ad infinitum, you're just reinforcing the very claim that the person has made as a starting point. That does not invalidate the claim or defeat it. And again, they'll use this. They'll say this is a defeatist or a defeating argument, and it really isn't. It's just a weak argument against skepticism. And there are arguments to make against certain versions of skepticism, but this just doesn't play.
Well, so I am curious to see if Jay has ever debated somebody who would fall back on that, right? So what he would do in that case, because I'm not aware of.
Oh, I can show you. Yeah.
Okay, if you have,
we'll jump ahead to that clip. Yeah. It's good. It's very similar. The reason I pulled this is very similar to the conversation that we had. As you can see, it's kind of fun. All right. Let's keep going here. We're close.
Argument against whether or not it's knowable. I can have arguments
anything.
Though.
You don't have an argument for anything at all.
Is it not possible to form arguments off of necessarily unjustified presuppositional beliefs?
No, you can't. That's exactly.
Then how do you? So are you saying that you are without?
Just ask
me. Hang on.
I have some presuppositional beliefs in which everything that I'm about to argue is dependent upon, but I don't have to justify that.
Wait, why don't you have to justify them?
That's your position. You just gave back.
Stating your position, dude.
I'm stating your position back to you.
Okay, good. So we're on the exact same page now.
If that's the case, you can't critique us, and we can just say we don't have to justify.
Yeah, what I'm trying to illustrate is what you just said. It was that position, and that means there is no argument. You're literally saying I'm going to say a bunch of things based on a bunch of other things that I don't have to I just made a bet on. I just
If that argument contradicts
But yeah, that in and of itself does not defeat the argument. The fact that he has made a bet, which again, I think I've demonstrated adequately, or at least I hope that I've gotten us on a somewhat similar page, that ultimately the transcendental argument does the same thing, where it is an argument to the most likely explanation for these things that we see, these universals, as Jay would call them, one of which is logic, right? The best explanation we have, Jay would say only explanation, but he can't really justify that level of certainty. It would require additional levels of justification, which just move the goalpost. So Jay ultimately is making a best argument case, which is also what this person is doing, or what this person is mocking the atheist for doing. And ultimately, they're on the same ground in that regard. Let me go back a few seconds.
Critique us, and we can just say we don't have to justify.
Yeah, what I'm trying to illustrate is what you just said. It was that position, and that means there is no argument. You're literally saying I'm going to say a bunch of things based on a bunch of other things that I don't have to. I just made a bet on.
If that argument contradicts experience, then it doesn't matter what you presuppose.
Now you're back to the question. We're asking for a justification that you can trust yourself.
So again, here, this is not a defeater, because the atheist is right that he's right to say that experience matters. He's wrong to say that experience would give him certainty. But actually, he's not saying that. So he's really not wrong. The atheist in this case is making the better point that experience is a helpful test of our presuppositions. It's a helpful way to assess and see if we're
What do you mean by
on the right
experience?
track.
Do you mean sense data when you mean experience?
I'm trying to think of if that is
like
all that it is. Yes, I do certainly mean sense data. Yes.
Okay.
I think it would probably be fair to summarize all of experience as the only way that we can connect with our experience is through senses.
Yeah. But I get it from their perspective, right? From the tag perspective, is that if you already admit that your bet can be faulty or that your sense data can be faulty, and you're trying to make these like holistic claims that from an atheist, like God doesn't exist. It's like, well, from what's your basis? If your basis, like if we take it down to the fundamental level, if it is just sense data, then like you can't, like you are just making bets at that point, right? There is no justified beliefs. Now, your point would just be that you are also making that claim, essentially, right?
I don't know any atheist that says with 100% certainty that God doesn't exist. They all will allow for a certain amount of uncertainty. They'll just say that it doesn't seem to be the best explanation.
But what I'm saying is they're not flipping it right on the other side, right? It's like, well, how do you have this just 100% justification that you say that I don't have, right?
Well, but again, the atheist wouldn't claim to have 100% justification.
No. The atheist wouldn't. So he's saying, so how do you have 100% justification that you say that I don't have, right? So if I agree with you, I'll accept your presupposition that I don't have perfect justification, perfect grounding for my beliefs, but I don't think you do either, right? Can you prove to me that you do?
Yes, right. And that's what I'm saying I don't think Jay can do. And Jay never actually does in any of his streams. He will always just go on the offensive and show that they can't justify it. And then he'll kind of make some, again, sort of sophist explanations or just sort of talking points to get around trying to justify it himself. But he never is able to justify in a way that's satisfying to me and just logically satisfying in general. I'm a good enough... I have a good enough sense for how correct logic works to know that it is not logically sufficient, the arguments that Jay will make for his own justification. They all end up being arguments from the most, or arguments to the most probable explanation.
So you use the most probable, but he uses
the impossibility to contrary.
Impossibility to contrary. Yeah. Is there
you
a difference
can show
there that I'm missing?
Well, no. So there is a difference between those two statements, but ultimately, you can show that certain things are impossible or logically impossible. You still kind of have to justify your use of logic in general, but still, you can show that something is logically impossible, that there's a logical contradiction. But in order for that just shows that you would exclude that one thing from, again, a theoretically infinite number of things that someone could be saying. So just showing that one is logically impossible doesn't mean that another one is possible or is true. And so ultimately, you're just trying to that is a way of getting to a more probable outcome because you're excluding the bad ones, and so you're increasing the probability that the one that you have is correct because you're shrinking the pool, so to speak. Of course, if that pool is infinite, it doesn't really help you much, but I guess in theory it still is kind of helping. But if the pool is discrete, if you have a nice little number of things that you can disprove, then everything that you disprove is going to increase the chances that your perspective is correct. But you're still just reasoning to a most likely. Right. If you were able to truly disprove everything else, then you would get to 100% certainty, I suppose.
Like, are you supposing that there are more options? Right. So are you thinking that there are unknowns out there? Are you? But what would your justification be for unknown explanations out there? So that you would have to appeal to what for that?
So yeah, I think that worldview thinking, which tends to go along with presuppositional apologetics, which tends to group these worldviews into particular discrete groups, I think there's actually a lot of soundness there. I think that they probably are correct that there are these sort of basic groups of like pantheism, atheism. There's a couple, there's like 5 or 6 others that they will often group them into, and I'm sure the groups aren't always. I'm sure they disagree on exactly how to group them, but you get these discrete groups. I think that it probably is. It does encompass most of the worldviews out there, if not maybe all of them, if you're broad enough. I think you're probably gonna have more issues with the mutually exclusive part of the Mises formula, where you're gonna have some overlap, and so I don't know that you're gonna be able to exclude them in these nice little discrete ways. But I think that it's a pretty good argument. Like, I don't hate tag. I don't hate the reductio ad absurdum. I just think that because it can't get you to 100% certainty. I think that you have to allow for the fact that there are, in a sense, an infinite number of bad worldviews.
Well, but how do you? Well, so my question there is essentially, let's say I take the tag perspective 100%, and I say it is the only possibility for knowledge itself, for logic to exist. You have to have this transcendental category that is God, right? If there is nothing else that can bridge that gap, and you say, well, it's the only thing that you don't know or that you know of that could bridge that gap because there's something that you're missing, right? Where do you get the justification that something is missing? Where do you get that piece of knowledge from?
Well, if you are trying to claim logically that the fact that you don't know of anything else that works, that means that what you see
that
does
both of
work.
us don't know of anything else that works.
Sure, if both of us,
that
even
no
still,
one else knows of anything else that works.
Fair enough. You are still, if you make the claim that logically from that if statement you get to this particular statement is correct by necessity, you are making a logical fallacy of
right, but wouldn't that satisfy the definition of impossibility to the contrary, at least as far as humans can satisfy?
You would have to justify the claim. Well, I mean,
because that's a qualification in and of itself.
With that qualification,
that is a qualification in and of itself, right?
But so now you have to go and just think practical apologetics. Now to the person that you're talking to, you have to get them on board with all of that in order to convince them, and that's a tall order.
I think simply you could go to the reverse route. It's like, can you suppose something that would fill that gap, right? So it's like,
and so get them to think from their own perspective. Hey, can you think of anything? And if they say no, then say, hey, maybe you should consider this. Again, love it.
Well, just being like, this is the only thing that can. This is the only thing. This is the only argument that I've ever seen that can, basically.
That I've ever seen. As long as you put that qualifier, then you're right.
As long as I qualify the absolute. As long as I qualify the absolute statement, we're pretty good. All right, I get it.
That's all I'm saying. It is a big difference because one leads to fallacious statements, which Jay will make all the time, and the other one is actually a pretty good argument that can get people on board with, but you don't have to call people idiots in the process of arguing for it.
Well, that's part of it. That's part of the ad hominem fallacy right there.
Yeah, right.
Senses, and you just keep saying my senses.
That's presupposed.
Yeah, we're asking for
the reliability of senses is a presupposition that I know is unjustifiable.
Asking for a justification for a belief in the principle itself, and you're saying I don't have to.
Well, for belief itself, I mean, the first belief that I have is that I'm capable of belief. Next question.
If you're going to be consistent, then we're just going to say, okay, you're going to get annoyed when we just accept that standard and say, okay, we don't need to justify our belief in God. Okay, next question.
Well,
I mean, what's funny about that is that you don't have to justify your belief in God deductively, which presuppositionalists, that's kind of the starting point. At least it should be. But again, then they undermine the fact that they believe in God as a presupposition by trying to justify it deductively, which then just negates it from being a presupposition. Or they can claim that they're operating at a level of meta logic, but you got to justify what that even means. And so, basically they both should just agree that that you can't justify those presuppositions.
The issue is then, well, the more important question would be then, what is God?
We don't have to give an answer for that next question. It's presupposed. Do you see how that doesn't?
That bothers me too, because
It does bother me too, but
you do have to define God. That is
this is the fight, though, right? Because if you're in an argument with an atheist who already gives up the ground that he can't justify any of his presuppositions, right? But then he asks you to justify yours, right?
But that's different from asking them to define. I get what they're saying, and they were right about the God statement. But then when he asks for a definition of God, then they're wrong. Then they can't say, "Oh, that's presupposed." Ooh, what does that even mean? I'm asking for a definition. You can't say, "Hey, what is a triangle?" Oh, a triangle is presupposed. Oh, no, what is a triangle? You can I guess presuppose the definition, but you still have to state the definition. Presupposing that God exists does not allow you to not define.
Provide a definition.
Yeah, provide a definition. So it's just not. It's not fair argumentation.
Well, I mean, I would just, from their perspective, like, you don't even need to get into the nitty gritty of it. You just say he's the transcendental category that holds the world together, right? That logic and knowledge flows from, right? That's the only way to have a possibility of real knowledge, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. I think that I don't.
I mean, from the tag definition, you don't even need to use the Christian definition. You can just use the tag definition.
Well, of course, but the tag argument, as proposed by Jay Dyer, is he always will. When he's being, pedantic with his wording, he will say the Christian God.
Right, but
his view is that it is only the Christian God.
Simplify it to an atheist, right? But if you tag, you just say the God thing that holds everything together, right? But if you say, okay, well, the Trinity, and then you have to explain all this other stuff within the Christian theology, so it gets a lot more complicated. So the simplest way is just give the tag explanation.
And you would still be correct. It just wouldn't be a complete definition, but it's impossible to get a complete definition for God.
Work to critique
so is God just any presupposition whatsoever?
No.
Then what is God?
Do you see what I'm pointing out? Do you see what I'm pointing out?
Can we do? Let's do one person at a time.
Go ahead.
So are you saying that presuppositions are necessarily unquestionable as well? That even if they are unjustified, we can't question. Even if we know that they were justifiable and unadopted, that we can't question them.
Hush for a second, please. So we're not saying that presuppositions are unjustified. We're asking you for a justification. That's all we're doing. We believe
presuppositions are definitionally unjustifiable, though.
No, that's not true. You're totally wrong. We completely disagree with that. So you don't know what you're talking about. That's what.
How do you justify a presupposition?
By the impossibility contrary, by showing that it's a necessary precondition for the possibility of knowledge. This is what transcendental arguments are. That's what we do here.
Again, notice he used the term necessary. So he's putting himself in the category of syllogism, and he cannot justify that claim to the level that he has claimed that he can.
Oh, this is the transcendental argument? Hang on. There's a paper. I'm trying to remember what it is. I know that there's a name, and I know that there's a paper that basically all but demonstrated the impossibility of like a transcendence arguments.
If you want, so I'm not interested in the fact that you knew of a paper one time. Do you have arguments that you want to make? Because we just critiqued your basic empiricism, and you're saying I don't have to give an account for empiricism. Okay, then I don't have to give an account for theism, and you don't have an argument.
Well, the issue is that if we are to try to account for theism, you'd have to demonstrate the necessity of what you term God. That is, you have to define God for me so that I can determine whether or not I find that to be a necessary thing for the universe.
Yeah, but I don't have to do that if you've just admitted that nobody has to justify their presuppositions.
I said that presuppositions are unjustifiable. That does not mean that there can be.
Right, they're unjustifiable deductively. They are justifiable inductively. If they would separate those two from the get-go, this conversation would never have taken the course that it did. But as long as you're using the term
Well,
justification,
possibly. You never know how it goes.
they'd find a way. Yeah.
Be presuppositions that are wrong.
I just said we don't have to justify our presuppositions. So
that doesn't preclude them from the possibility of being wrong.
Okay,
right.
so then what's your criteria for determining the true and the false?
Non-contradiction is a good start.
Yeah. So, and how do you justify logic? Well, you're going to say it's what appeals, what matches up to reality, right? Is it also an empirical thing?
Logic is probably going to be extrapolated from the way that we experience things. Yes.
Yeah. So that's what you said in the first proposition, which you couldn't justify. So now you're back to another circle.
The only thing that I can justify is that I have experience, and all things else are going to be sort of extrapolated from there.
You can't even justify that. That's why you keep not understanding the question.
Well, it's because it's kind of self-evident that I have experience.
Okay, then it's self-evident that God exists. If you can appeal to self-evident,
what is God?
But this is the thing. It is self-evident that God exists. That is the presuppositional position. So why is Jay mocking his own position? That should be where the starting point for a presuppositionalist.
Well, right, but he's saying if you presuppose, right, that sense data exists, that I exist, right, because that you can presuppose your own experiences, right? I am experiencing something in this moment in time, right? It's like, well, fine, if you can presuppose that, then I'm just going to presuppose God. I'm just going to use your argument to say that, okay, I've already won.
Right. My point is he should just do it and then work from the point. That he hasn't won. That's the part that doesn't make sense. You can't say, well, then I can just presuppose God and I've already won. It's like, no, of course you can presuppose God. You can presuppose a ham sandwich, but that doesn't make it a true statement. I mean, the guy is right. Just because you presuppose something doesn't mean that it's right. And just because you can't prove it deductively doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. And so then Jay asks, well, okay, what is your justification? What is your criteria for truth? And that's a great question. That is the hard thing. And ultimately, if you don't believe in epistemic certitude, then you have to rely on the best thing that we have, which is our experience, our sense data, and our understanding, and sort of, the law of non-contradiction is sort of we can extrapolate that from our sense data. And as long as we don't require epistemic certitude, then
I can't
just give me a second.
Though.
Let me just finish. As long as we don't require epistemic certitude, as long as we recognize that all of us are working to an argument or a most probable explanation, then it is okay to argue for your presuppositions on the basis of your experience. There is no reason why that is a problem, because you're just building a case, which there's no problem with that. It's only when you try to claim epistemic certitude from your empirical sense data that you are being fallacious, that you're contradicting Hume, and that's when you run into issues. But that's not what the atheist is doing. So the atheist here, again, is right, and Jay is wrong. Even though Jay's right in his conclusion. Jay's right in his presupposition, but he's wrong in the way that he is defending his presupposition.
Right, but I think that if you say that logic kind of comes from sense data, but you say that sense data can be wrong, then how do you get something that is, by definition, not wrong, which is logic,
I'm not saying logic comes from sense data. I'm just saying that the way that we know about the law of non-contradiction. How did you learn about the law of non-contradiction, John? Well, either you experienced it, or you sort of extrapolated from your experiences, or someone told you about it, right? I mean, you may have been born with a sense for it, but how do you even come to the recognition that you have that sense for it? It's like,
but
I'm not saying that it's based on your experience.
Learning about it isn't relevant to it, right? Because somebody couldn't learn about it and it would still be unfalsifiable, right?
Sure, but I think so.
Like the laws of logic are unfalsifiable, right? You believe that?
Yeah.
Okay. So is that a thing that actually exists?
Yes, logic.
Like objectively. Well, can you give a justification for it existing?
Yes. I mean, God is the justification.
Well, right. It's the same thing, but it's your biggest problem is really trying to be internally consistent with epistemic certitude versus just a high probability
claim. If you require epistemic certitude, then you are going to run into issues. You are going to always have internal issues because you're going to require a level of justification that you can't provide. So, like, for me, I can justify my belief in logic as a real thing on the basis of God, because logic is not my presupposition. And some statement about logic is not my presupposition. I believe that there is logic because I believe in God. God is my presupposition, and from God flows logic. And that's a totally valid statement. So
right,
I can
and it was
justify
funny.
logic. I just can't.
You and Jay have the same argument. It's just about epistemic certitude. So it's like, yeah, I mean, I agree with you.
And can you guys see this?
I can blow it up. Gotcha.
Let's see.
Jamie, blow that up.
That's right. So I mean, I've shown this before, but this is the argument. This is all knowledge, all rationality. There you go. All knowledge is encapsulated here. And what I would call rational knowledge is just this box, which is in experiences leading to postulates, which then lead to conclusions, which then reinforce our experiences, which then again inform the faith on which we base our postulates. And so knowledge necessarily depends on the postulates. You don't get any knowledge until you have faith. All knowledge depends on faith. All knowledge depends on faith. So you don't get any knowledge until you start to form some faith-based postulates, although those are going to come from your experiences. So the raw sense data, when it's just raw sense data and has no faith associated with it, is not. It's what I call knowledge of acquaintance. It's this box over here. It's just raw experience. But then once that is informed by some faith, which then feeds your conclusions, which then goes back into the experiences, that's when you actually start to get rational knowledge. That's when you're learning things. But the knowledge starts right here with your first postulate. And then this other category of knowledge is the knowledge by instinct. That's the knowledge that God does bake into us, and that probably does inform the postulates that we have. And so, like, faith in God probably makes a lot more sense to us because God does bake us with a certain amount of knowledge of God, right? The heavens declare the glory of God. We do have a knowledge of God in our nature, I certainly believe. So there is this instinct, and instinct by definition is pre-birth. It's knowledge that we have that is not learned. Rational knowledge is always going to be learned knowledge. Instinct is going to be knowledge that we didn't learn, and if we didn't learn it, that means it was built into us before we were even born. These three categories, the raw sense data, or knowledge by acquaintance, the rational knowledge, the knowledge that we've learned, and then the instinct, the knowledge that we have built into us from the get-go, that covers all your knowledge. But when we talk about logic and induction and deduction, we're just talking about this rational stuff going on here. And the induction goes down this arrow, and the deductions go up here from postulates to conclusions. And this is a pretty good explanation for all of knowledge. I have not found this to fail me yet.
But you can't justify it. You just have a high probability.
Yeah. Fair enough. What's it to me?
Well, I don't know.
Because I can also demonstrate. I can also.
I don't know that I could know, James. I don't know that I could know.
As long as I can also demonstrate in talking to another person that that's the best that they can do, that they can't justify in a perfect way with epistemic certitude any of their claims either, then at least we're on equal footing. And yes, can I even know that I'm having this conversation with a person? No, maybe it's all a dream and I'm being tormented by a demon, or I'm in a matrix capsule. It's like there are all kinds of silly things I could say that are, I suppose, possible. I can't logically show that those aren't true, but I can say that I know that those aren't true on the basis of my presupposition being God, right? That's not the world that God tells me that he's made for me. Therefore, assuming God, I can say, no, that's not what's happening. I'm not in a matrix. I'm actually living in the world, and I can relatively trust my sense data for the most part. I can't fully trust it because I am finite and I am imperfect, and it's helpful to be able to double check things, but I have a general sense for my senses being correct. And logic is another thing where it's like logic seems even more correct than my senses, and that again flows from this knowledge of God. It's like once you accept God, then all of this makes sense. And in fact, that is the only thing that seems to explain all of this stuff that I can tell. Is it the only thing that could ever possibly explain? Because I'm a finite being, I can't conceive of all possible other explanations, so I have to say no. But of all the things that I have conceived of, it seems like the best explanation.
Well, do you have to say no, though? I guess that's where the rub is. Do you have to say no, right? Because wouldn't that also just be an appeal to some unknown force out there?
It seems to me that if you can say no, you have to. Like, if someone could say no, they don't know, then I'm not sure why I could claim to know and they couldn't, especially when, and that certainly is what feels more like, why would you say yes? What would be your justification for saying yes?
Well, again, if there is no other option that's ever been presented that makes sense, that grounds logic, that grounds reality and the possibility of objective truth, if there's nothing else that's ever been presupposed,
I think
or that's
nihilism
been
is pretty
proposed.
consistent. Nihilism does a pretty good job because it doesn't need objective proof or objective truth. It doesn't it just says nothing matters at all. There is no order, and
Yeah, but I don't think that's
matter.
internally consistent, right?
Well, I think
because
it is pretty internally consistent.
as
It doesn't
soon as I
provide an
put the gun in their
explanation for-
mouth, they start crying about how life matters and they want to see
Yeah,
tomorrow
but
and
that's ad
whatnot.
hominem.
So
You're
that's
just
not
saying
ad
maybe-
hominem. No. They
Isn't it?
say that
Because the
nothing
person
matters.
No, you're saying because the person would choose to continue living, then his position is false. That doesn't, just because what he would choose isn't consistent with his position doesn't actually mean that his position is false.
Wait, run that. Okay, necessarily false. Right.
The fact that he would choose something that's different.
Okay, but the fact that no nihilist lives as a nihilist doesn't invalidate nihilism as an idea.
Exactly. Let me explain why it is ad hominem. Let's say you have someone who is against adultery, and he goes and commits adultery, and then you say, hey, you're against adultery, which is a true position. You should be against adultery, but you committed adultery, therefore you've just demonstrated your position is false. You actually, adultery is great. That would be an ad hominem attack. That's like you're trying to disprove the statement from the fact.
How is pointing out hypocrisy directly ad hominem, right?
Well, you're making a case from what the person does, what the person would decide, the person's character, in this case, choosing life over being shot in the head, or choosing to commit adultery over doing the right thing, that personal action has some import on the if-then statement of the truth of the issue of either adultery or nothing mattering at all, right? The fact that someone is hypocritical and that they say that nothing matters, but they actually think when pressed that something matters, doesn't actually mean, in a way that is logically necessary, that anything matters. It could all just be random stuff, and death could be preferable to life, even if someone who says they think death is preferable to life chooses life.
But even if you say something is preferable, does the word preference insinuate something mattering? Infer a level of importance?
Again, you're going to the person. You're asking what the person would choose or prefer or think. You're not.
Is there anything in the universe that doesn't have like a preferential state of being?
Sorry, unpack that for me.
Well, so I'm trying to think, where in the universe does nihilism?
Preferences for truth don't make your preferences true.
No. But I'm just saying, like where can we actually observe something that is nihilistic? Right? Maybe I'm just thinking about this. I'm just thinking out loud here.
I don't know. You go to Russia around the time of the Great Revolution, and I think that you would find a lot of people living out in a semi-nihilistic way. Maybe not completely. I don't know that anyone does perfectly live out nihilism, but you do get people acting in very nihilistic ways.
I mean, even just like animals in nature, right? But even somebody committing a mass atrocity is committing that mass atrocity because he feels that state is better than another. But like a deer, for instance, a deer isn't nihilistic. Like you could say are we saying deterministic and nihilistic? Are we wrapping those two together?
I'm not sure. I mean, they're different. I'm not.
Well, because you could say that nature is deterministic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not nihilistic.
Yeah, they're not necessarily the same. There's a Christian determinism and there's an atheist determinism.
Well, I mean, like generically, events are set in motion, right? So, like a deer lives and dies in the woods, not because of anything necessarily that it set up in the universe, right?
No, I do think that nihilism is necessarily, I would think, materialistic, or materialism is definitely nihilistic, and materialism is definitely deterministic. So those often do go together out of a well of materialism. There might be a way to be spiritual and nihilistic, maybe, I don't know, and there might be a way to be there certainly is a way to be spiritual and deterministic, right? I mean, even Christians
of course. Yeah.
They shouldn't be, but they can be. So those two do tend to go together, but they are separate concepts. Did we finish it? We did, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's 30 seconds left.
So, yeah, I thought that was a fruitful playback. There's a lot there. And what frustrates me is I agree with Jay on the presuppositions. I agree with Jay on the fact, of God's existence. And, pretty much the definition of God we're working with is not different. Not that different. There might be some smaller differences. And yet I find myself feeling like the atheist in this conversation was arguing much more genuinely and from a much more reasoned position. I mean, his logic just made a lot more sense than Jay's. And ultimately, this conversation, I think you're right. They just never let him get past the point where he said that he doesn't have certainty, and they just beat him over the head with that.
Right. Well, I suppose
he was never able to press them on the fact that they don't have it either.
Well, but can you say for certainty that they don't have certainty? I think that was kind of a loop we got into last time.
You can say that on the basis of your presuppositions, one of which being, again, for me, God, and the other one being that we can't because well, not another presupposition, but on the basis of God, I think that we do share a decent amount of experience, and your personal experience is not wholly different from mine, then yes, I can say I know on the basis of my presuppositions that you don't know either. Assuming your inner life is anything like my inner life. And also I can show you that, tell me why you would justify, and I can make internal critiques for why it doesn't work and why you would need to justify more and why you're just moving the goalposts. And so ultimately, yes, I can't say with certainty because I can't even say with certainty that we're having this conversation again, but I can say, I can press the internal critiques, and I can say that on the basis of, my presuppositions, absolutely, I can say these things. All right, let's jump to the third clip. You can drive this time. Okay. So yeah, just pull up the third one that I sent.
Christian is here just like, gosh dang, what did I get myself into this week? A logic debate again. Is it the Jay Dyer versus Skeptic? James? Okay,
yes.
So this one. All right, here we go.
Okay, so how would you respond if someone said that these prophecies, like the 70 weeks prophecy, inspired Jesus to start his movement, right? Like he read it and he thought this is the time the Messiah is here, and there were a bunch of movements like that. Like the Life of Brian thing. People expected the Messiah at the time.
Well, I mean, I think there's all kinds of things that, I mean, it's not like there's just a couple of these. There's so many prophecies throughout the Old Testament that it's more than just, hey, could we find a dude born in this town who could act this way? I mean, there's a lot more than that, right? There's a certain genetic lineage that has to happen. I mean, there's certain. Let me give you another example. I mean, there's the prophecy not just about Jesus, but that the world would honor his mother. So did they trick everybody into honoring Mary? I mean, Mary prophesies, everybody will call me blessed.
I mean, they read those things and they thought we're supposed to do this stuff, right? Like they thought he was a Messiah, and they said that they're supposed to honor his mother, so they said we got to honor Mary because it says
I'm saying the prophecy specifically says that the nations will call her that. Did they trick everybody into that too? When Jesus says that when I'm lifted up, I will draw all nations to myself. Do you not understand that's a prophecy? So that it's not just a question of can we find a guy like in Life of Brian who's born in this village and can act this way. There's all these other amazing elements that also are part of this. For example, all of these prophecies that talk about the nations worshiping the God of Israel. How would all the Gentile nations worship the God of Israel? And if that does occur, it's said to be one of the key signs that the Messiah has come. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess the Jews would say that people aren't really worshiping the God of Israel because they say that they're Unitarian.
Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the Jews say.
Yeah, right. I get it. Yeah, I know. I was just thinking. Yeah, and about the lineage, some people would argue that they constructed, that they didn't really know his lineage, and these later Christians came up with these genealogies. Sort of to reconcile.
Okay, so now you're just asserting all this stuff. What's your actual evidence for that? You're saying they would say that some people would say who? What are you talking about?
The genealogy are contradictory, right? I mean, I know there's explanations, proposed explanations, but there's an apparent contradiction in between Matthew and Luke.
Well, I mean, so now it's a question of do you accept the arguments for the reconciliation of those things, right? So so you have a worldview, I guess, of what? What's your position?
Agnostic.
On everything, or just on theism?
I guess I lean towards a kind of academic skepticism where there's just probabilities.
Of like everything is probabilities, or what do you mean?
Cicero. I mean, we can't really be completely 100% sure about anything, but we can have reasons to believe certain things are more likely than their opposite.
Okay, what about that? Can we be sure of that?
No, but it's more likely than not. We can't be 100% sure. It's just more probable than not.
Okay, so we can't.
What about that?
What about that phrase itself? Can you be sure of that?
No, it's just more likely than not. That's the point.
Okay, so you're caught in. Yeah, now you're caught in a regress.
You're in an infinite regress of trying to get out of making 100% absolute statements by throwing another one out there and another one, in which case the whole thing crumbles.
Mm-hmm. But they're assuming that he at some point needs to make an absolute 100% certain statement, which is the very point in question. He is saying he doesn't have to make that. They're asserting that at some point you do have to make that, otherwise you're going to be caught in infinite regress. But he doesn't have to ever make that. So I think that's the, I don't think that attack plays out. It is just imposing a defeat where.
Well, it's imposing your own argument on them, right?
Right. So it's not going to be convincing.
No, but yeah. So that's where there's no real conversation. And is this going to devolve into?
I'm trying to think what else from this one.
Excuse me. Is this going to devolve into tag? Like, is Jay actually going to try and give the justification for his own beliefs?
I'm looking through my notes.
Jay should have law of excluded middle, that man bun. Yes. Quick, Christian, can you name the 3 laws of logic?
Nope.
Damn it. Well, I'll give you one. Law of the excluded middle, law of identity, and law of non-contradiction.
Yeah. You probably don't even need all 3. I think you can get by with just law of non-contradiction, but I guess the 3 all support each other.
Well, you can't disprove the other 2, though, right? Not that they're necessary for every argument, but they stand.
Yeah. Yeah. And to clarify, law of identity is just A equals A. Law of non-contradiction is A does not equal B, and or I guess
no, it's
basically A. They cannot both not equal and not equal at the same time. A cannot.
Yeah, A can't equal
not equal
A
B and equal B
and not A.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then law of excluded middle is it's substitution, right? The law of substitution, where if A equals B and C equals B, then A equals C. You exclude the middle term being B, and now you see A equals C. From those 3 laws.
Well, no, is excluded middle is different, isn't it? So thing is either A or it's B. It's not half A, half B, right? Isn't that excluded middle? I'm gonna look it up. I just want to make sure because that.
Yeah, confirm. I think it's substitution, but I could be off.
Okay, law of the excluded middle. In logic, the law of the excluded middle or the principle of excluded middle states that for every proposition, either this proposition or its negation is true. Okay, so put this in a syllogism for me. The conference is not always true. Counterexamples, proven teacher should. When the bivalence fails. Okay, so it is impossible then that being a man should mean precisely not being a man if man only signifies something about one subject but also has one significance, that it will not be possible to be and not be the same thing except in virtue of an ambiguity, just as on whom we call man. Okay, I kind of get that. I've heard this explained much simpler though, and I just wanted a really simple definition.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, I'd have to read more about it. I could be off. It might not be substitution.
And there's no reason to believe anything you're saying.
Is that right? I mean, it's not practical to be a Pyrrhonist, right? It's not practical not to believe in anything. That's the problem.
Well, but the point
you just don't have any good reasons.
The point is that you don't have any good reasons to believe in anything at all, much less agnosticism.
How do you not believe in agnosticism? If you don't believe in anything at all,
I'm saying you don't have a good reason to tell us that agnosticism is what we ought to believe. You just refuted your own basis for agnosticism.
Isn't it? So what is someone supposed to believe as a default, so to speak? I mean,
we're just showing the absurdity of the non-theistic.
Like, I'm not sure that you need. I'm not entirely sure about this statement, but. Or about anything, I guess. But I'm not sure that you need a reason for a negative assertion. You can't positively assert agnosticism, but I'm not sure that you need to, right? Like, for example, if someone says, I'm not sure, you can't just then say, why are you not sure? I don't know that you have to provide a reason for not being sure. You probably could provide a reason. I mean, an agnostic could provide all kinds of reasons why he's not sure, but do you have to?
You can't provide a sure reason why you're not sure.
No, you can't provide a sure reason, but you can still provide.
So I think that's what Jay's getting at. But yeah, I mean, this only really applies to these really foundational, like, gotcha type moments, because again, like, there are lots of things in life that I'm not sure of, right? And I don't know how not being sure is not like, I don't know, if I fell 10 foot off a roof, I'm pretty sure I would hurt myself, but like, there's a possibility that I magically don't, right?
Right. Well, that's the thing. It's like there's another point. I don't know if it's in this video or another one. I think it is in this video where towards the end of this video, actually, he says, you can't explain your reason for, believing this or whatever. You can't justify it perfectly or whatever. And I think the atheists are right. They will usually make this kind of claim. They'll say, just because I can't explain it doesn't mean I can't use it. They'll say that about logic. And I think they kind of have a point, because I can't explain perfectly how gravity works, and yet I'm not going to jump off this porch, right? Like, you can still you can observe that something seems to be operating. It seems to exist in your experience, and on that basis, use it, and then make some certain some extrapolations from your use of it and its continued work. You don't have to be able to perfectly explain it in order to use it, and so I'm not sure that the necessity of explaining logic is. I'm not sure that Jay completely makes that case.
Right, because like, I can't fully explain what gravity is, but I'm still bound to it. So even if I, as an atheist, couldn't fully justify logic, I could say, well, I'm still bound by it, though.
Right, your ability to explain something is not what makes it true or false.
Yeah.
Worldview, which is what you appear to
appeal
hold,
to argument fallacy.
that it makes knowledge impossible. It's a defeater for knowledge.
Maybe you can't justify all the knowledge you have. You can know exactly why you have it.
No, you can't justify any knowledge, is the point. Any claim you make, given. So why would I listen to you about why would I listen to your arguments about your account of history and the Hebrews and Jewish Messiah and all this revelation and whatnot, when I don't have any kind of coherent argument from you about how knowledge is even possible?
I don't think you have an explanation that's any better.
Well, I don't from the outset propose things that make knowledge impossible, and you do. So I'm in a much better position.
I mean, someone could argue that your beliefs also seem kind of absurd in many ways, because the world seems to be, I mean, this is old stuff that I didn't come up with, but the world seems very unjust, for example, right? Like, the wicked prosper and the good people suffer. So this idea that you've got a God monotheistic.
And what is your standard for justice?
It's an internal critique of your view. I'm not taking
an internal critique is not a standard for justice.
Yeah, but I'm saying your own worldview seems.
You're not in a position to critique my worldview when you don't have a basis for knowledge at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jay is just wrong on this. The caller is right. He is making an internal critique. He's just, I mean, it's just the problem of evil. And Jay is, rather than addressing the problem of evil, he's just totally dodging it with a tu quoque. He's saying, well, you can't explain things either, and rather than justifying his own belief. And to make an internal critique, all you have to do is accept the position of another person and then make that critique. I understand, I guess, what Jay would say to this is, well, if you haven't justified your use of logic in the first place, then you can't even have any conversation. But, then why even talk? It doesn't, you are engaging in this kind of debate. And when someone throws an internal critique at you, you should be able to address that, or at least explain why you don't need to address that, not just lob it back as a tu quoque and dodge. It's just not fair. And the caller is absolutely right that he does not have to, accept Jay's God in order to make the critique of the problem of evil the most well-known critique of theism in general. Jay should be able to address that, not just dodge it completely. Now, the only way to really address the problem of evil is more or less with a tu quoque, but it's with a different tu quoque. It's not, you can't even ask me that. It's there's not really a good explanation for good either. An atheist cannot provide a good explanation for good. That is a tu quoque, but it's one that is directly parallel to the problem of evil. And then there are a number of other, while we're on the topic of, kind of defeater arguments, which the problem of evil is the only one that seems to internally be a real problem for Christianity, there are a number of other similar defeater arguments against atheism that are at the same level of defeatingness. Basically, the problem of evil is the only one that really plays well against Christianity, and even that has some explanations that aren't perfectly satisfying, but are pretty good. And you can, once you sort of address that, move in the other direction, but you can't just dodge it completely. That just seems unfair.
Well, so maybe I'm confused because the problem of evil hasn't really ever been a problem that I've had to deal with. Because, I mean, if God allows us to be actors in the world, and you combine that with free choice, right? So there is the good, the true, the beautiful, that is God's will. But if we have free will to not do that thing, the problem of evil is simply the problem of us, right?
I mean, do you believe in God's sovereignty?
Yes, but God condescends to us for secondary causes, right? So God allows us to make impacts upon the world.
Yeah, but the distinction between first and secondary causes, when you believe in a perfectly sovereign God, is very hard to justify. We have to justify it because we have to believe that God is not the author of evil. We can't give evil an ontology of its own. So we have to recognize that there is a distinction there, but actually teasing out what that distinction is, right? If God is the one who made us, and he knows our choices, and he actually directs our ways, and yet somehow he isn't the one who causes us to sin. We do that out of our free choice.
Yes, but I think there's maybe it's a contradiction, but I think you can have it both and, right? He both directs our ways and allows us to be our own agents, right? To be our own actors upon the world.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there are answers. They're never.
I mean, I suppose you could complain then. Well, okay, well then God is just allowing all of this to happen. Then, right? That's your retort to everything. Is okay. Well, it's still God's fault because He's allowing it to happen in your worldview, right?
Right. Well, yeah, and not my worldview, but
well, I'm just saying, that would be the retort, right, to an atheist.
Right.
To what I'm saying.
To me, it's free will, which again is its own can of worms because I'm a Calvinist and I do believe in presupposition. Even if I wasn't a Calvinist, even if I was a Catholic, I'd still believe in not presupposition, predestination. Even Thomistic Catholic basically believes very similar level of predestination. And so it's really hard to reconcile that with free will, although I do allow for free will as well. And so that does feel very much like a contradiction. And I just think you just have to hold those two things in conflict, in tension, I should say, not in conflicts. We assume that there is no actual conflict in God's rationality. However, in terms of just your general Christian, you can just say free will explains the problem of evil away. The problem is it doesn't really explain away natural evil, is the term for, hurricanes and cancer and, those sorts of things, death in general. Except Christians are able to do that with sin. Basically, Christians say that when man fell because of our free choice, all nature fell at the same time, and that's why there's all manner of corruption, right? So that is the way that we kind of get around that as well. Yeah, but it still isn't a perfect explanation. Anything that gives God, as we should, pays God the honor of perfect sovereignty. It's really hard to say that and not make God the author of evil.
Do you think God condescends to us? Like God allows us to impart actions on the world?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I think that he somehow weaves those into his perfect plan, and I'm not sure exactly how that works, and it's hard to know if that's just like if God, like, is God ever really surprised? Well, he's not surprised because he has perfect foreknowledge, but he also has perfect foredirection, and so is God just sort of in his outside of time view? He lets us all like make our choices and then weaves it all into this perfect
so that's the
tapestry
thing
that
too, trapped in a linear mindset, it's difficult to try and think outside of a linear model, right? That we project onto the world.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, these are all good ways of sort of explaining why it's a more complicated issue. It's not a defeater for Christianity. There are some explanations that we can't fully understand the actual explanation, but we can start to understand some of the criteria for the explanation in the same way that we have not yet perfectly been able to harmonize Newtonian physics with quantum physics, but we kind of understand the criteria for what would have to be a part of the final unifying theory.
What's your word for the unknown third?
The tertium quid. Yeah,
tertium
third
quid,
thing.
that's the word. It's the big word that I always forget.
Yeah.
Because you're using things that are unjustified on your worldview, like logic. What's your account of logic?
I don't even need that. If it's an internal critique, it's like you can tell.
No, you do need that. So you can't even do you can't do an internal critique without relying on something like a principle of logic.
You can tell a Protestant, for example, that sola scriptura is not found in Scripture. You don't need to be able to believe in Scripture to see that.
Now, that's a false analogy because doing an internal critique still presupposes some usage of logic to make the critique. He left.
No, I just need to use your logic. I don't even need to believe
There's no such
myself,
thing as
right?
There's no such thing as my logic. That's not even
Vince
my
Dagan.
logic. No, logic is not.
Yeah, it's literally mine.
Say it. I invented logic.
I will not stop screaming until you say I invented
stop
logic.
screaming until you admit I invented logic.
Not my system. Logic is a universal category that's used for all argumentation. So you're absolutely wrong. Do you understand that to make a critique, even if it's an internal critique, you're still assuming logic?
You could be arguing against logic by saying that by making an argument that logic has no foundation, for example.
Correct. Yeah. Aristotle points out that that's self-refuting. But that's not a justification for logic. What you're.
I'm not saying I'm justifying logic. I'm saying even if I can't explain certain things.
No, you can't explain. You're not even missing. You're not getting. You can't make sentences. You're not in a position to justify the usage and making of sentences. It's even more radical than that. So why should I listen to anything that proceeds from your mouth when your worldview has no account for logic, sentences, meaning at all?
I mean, most people would say that.
Appealing to most people.
Not practical?
I want to know. What do you say?
There we go. That's a fallacy, right? And I think he even says that if you play a couple more seconds, Jay calls him out. He says, "Oh, that's a fallacy," but it's actually not. The guy's just saying, "Hey, most people say this." He's not saying that necessarily because most people say this is true. That's not the claim that the guy is making. He's not saying this is a syllogism and here it is. Most people say it, therefore it's true. He's just saying like, well, most people say this. You can't just fallacy appeal to most people, or what is it? Bandwagon fallacy officially?
Yeah, probably something like that. But I mean, yeah, I think that if you were asking a question, is like, okay, Jay, so why do most people not hold your worldview? Do you believe, therefore, that most people do not have any justification for knowledge, right? Because that would actually force an answer from Jay on
exactly. It is a good piece of evidence in favor of your argument if you were talking to someone and most people.
Well, I wouldn't say that most people are like, don't use most people. That's not good evidence, right? Because a lot of people are stupid, right? So.
Fair point. But yeah, but it's, again, it's evidence. You can argue for whether it's good evidence or bad evidence, or strong or weak evidence. But it is a piece of evidence. If most people disagree with the person you're talking to, then that is a piece of evidence you can bring to the table. It doesn't necessarily conclude anything. It doesn't make a perfect syllogism, but it does provide one more piece of evidence that you can bring.
So like that's a fallacy. Most people would say this. Most people. What do you say?
What I would say is that it seems like you're just sort of trying to reframe the debate. Like, whenever someone asks you a question and you say, well, what's your worldview? I mean, this is a specific stuff.
I mean, that's the transcendental argument. That's the argument that we make. So I'm not trying to reframe it into something other than the very thing we always argue here.
Okay, so let's assume, do you think that the transcendental argument can prove Christianity just by itself?
Yeah, I think ultimately it logically leads to that, yeah.
But why? Why can someone believe in a kind of God that would allow you to have knowledge without being Christian?
Because not any kind of, quote, God does the actual work of grounding and justification.
Yeah, but we can get more specific. It could even be a triune God.
Well,
that's all right.
No, at that point, it would just be a facsimile, a copy and paste of our position.
But it wouldn't involve belief in the fullness of Orthodox Christianity, and so it wouldn't be Orthodox.
Yeah, but the argument is for the whole paradigm.
But if you think that you can prove metaphysically that we need a triune God and the essence-energy distinction and all that stuff, someone could be convinced of that using your logical arguments, but not be convinced by the historic truth of Christianity.
Again, we've addressed all this stuff a million times. The position is an argument for the entire worldview, including the historical account of Christianity, the incarnation. It's an entire worldview argument. It's not just an argument for the Trinity.
All right, so pause it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is the other area where presuppositionalism really struggles because it has this claim where it's like you have to believe not only in theism, because presuppositionalism generally they reject, as an apologetic approach, they reject the two-step method where you first prove that there is a God and then you show that it's the Christian God. They just try to do it all in one step. And it's a struggle for them because they always get to this point where they are saying that that the only explanation for logic is the Christian God specifically. It starts to become a lot harder when you then have to justify the fact that your whole worldview has to be accepted as an entire worldview. Why can't someone just come in with and kind of go to the cafeteria and pick the parts of your worldview that allow for logic and then walk away with that? Why do they have to accept all of your worldview? And again, that goes back to that whole Mises conversation. It's like, why you have to justify why your groupings of these worldviews are mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. Why can't someone just kind of pick the parts that they need to justify their logic and then move on with their life? Yeah, and that be another position that you now have to take down. So I think that it's an area where presuppositionalists struggle, and unfortunately Jay is usually too busy trying to defend the approach in the first place and his sort of poor view of logic that he never even gets to the real meat and potatoes of what presuppositional arguments should be, which is actually doing those reductio ad absurdums, actually doing the worldview argument of why you should be accepting his groupings, and that's kind of where presuppositionalism should go. That's the interesting part of it, and those are actually the kind of cool and can be helpful arguments in favor of Christianity. But he's too stuck on justifying the method at all, as he should be, because it's a bad method. His justification for the method is bad. The method is actually okay, but his justification for the method as being a necessarily certain means of getting at truth is just flat out wrong. And so that's where he spends all of his time rather than actually doing the interesting apologetic work.
Yeah. Well, as Reformed Renegade says, I've just employed tag. Now you have no basis of reality. It's like you bring out the tag argument, and your opponent just actually disappears.
Yeah.
Justify your own existence. You have 10 seconds before you disappear.
RR had an interesting comment earlier that I starred. We were talking about the whole, can you be certain that the sun's going to rise tomorrow?
I
whatever.
think that's a joke. I don't know.
I think it
we
is.
can
I think it is. I just like
funny.
it. It's a great little
think we can
ironic
know for
statement.
certain.
Yeah. I don't know. But,
Yeah,
and then also,
we could
I
probably
realized
know
that
for certain.
Yeah, we had a super chat earlier. I'm sorry we didn't display this earlier, but hi. Critical Sans Defense says high temp was 28 degrees here. I think that was towards the beginning. We were talking about the weather. I don't know where you are, sir, but
He's
that
in
sounds
Wisconsin.
Cold.
That's
that sounds
Ben.
kind of nice.
That's a local SWAT sniper, Ben. Our chasing down meth heads, Ben, police officer, man. Hope he's doing well. But yeah, it's freezing over here, bro. He's like 8 hours east of me.
Yeah, bring some of that cold weather down here.
Give it like 3 months, maybe January, maybe late January.
Maybe by January, yeah.
Well, hey, maybe SHOT Show again next year. You'll get some snow for a little while.
Yeah, at the very least. And well, I am going to do a night vision match in Ohio in a couple weeks, and I believe it's already started snowing there, so it should be actually pretty cold.
Yeah.
That'll be fun.
Bring lots
I think
of batteries.
somebody in the chat earlier. Yeah, somebody in the chat earlier said that it started snowing in Ohio. So yep.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
That'll be a bit of a culture shock.
Yeah. How serious is the battery thing? Because I haven't really done much shooting in serious cold conditions. Is that something I should be concerned about?
Yes.
On your lambs, especially.
Yeah. Yes.
Like this freaking mall has gone through 2 batteries. Although I think this has vampiric drain, so I've replaced the batteries twice in like the last couple months.
From my experience, optics are usually pretty good, but like lights and lambs are bad.
Yeah, very bad.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
I would just, if it's just a single night match, just start the match with a fresh battery. Make sure it works and just do it that way.
Okay.
It's worth the $1.50 or whatever it is for your CR123.
Right.
What lamb are you using, if you don't mind me asking?
I haven't decided yet.
Okay, too many options.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Hollison sent me the Iris, which I haven't even tested at all yet, so I probably won't use that one. It would be good to test it, but I kind of want to use something a little more sure about. I'll probably just use my D-ball because that's what I have on one of my favorite rifles, and I just haven't taken the time to put another one on it and zero it. But yeah, it'll be a good match.
Good. Well, this video only has 14 seconds left.
Okay. Well.
An awkward 14 seconds.
Excellent.
All right, fair enough. Thank you, Jay Dyer. Thank you, editor Jayub, for the last 12 seconds on there. Well, James, really, where I think this needs to go from here is I want to hear you and Jay actually just hash this stuff out.
I was going to say that.
I called him
That's
today.
what I want.
But I was too late. He'd already finished the conversation.
The call-in
part.
section?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm trying. I thought I had my notifications turned on. I'll double check all my different YouTube accounts and make sure that I'm notified next time. So I want to too. I think it'd be a good conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because I want to get actually down to the nitty gritty stuff and like have like a conversation. Now, obviously, that's not always the way it works out.
No.
A lot of the times it just devolves into a yelling match one way or the other, like regardless. But if it can actually happen, if there can be a good discussion going on, because I've heard Jay in other segments talk about how like at the foundational level, everything is circular, and that's fine in this, specific circumstance, right?
Yeah, I think it's special pleading. I think that it doesn't follow. All presuppositionalists will make that argument, but I think that it doesn't work out in my perspective. I mean, I've said this before, but basically it's okay to assume the assumption. You can't assume the conclusion. And presuppositionalists will say, well, in this particular case, it's okay to assume the conclusion. It's like, no, just call it an assumption and then move from there. It's okay to have assumptions. We all have to have assumptions. That's just how logic works. You got to start somewhere. So you start with presuppositions. Don't try to logically justify your presuppositions because that is circular and you can't make a case for special pleading. I mean, I guess if you do, then you got to justify that logically and you're just going to end up in your own little infinite regress. So Christian's getting tired. Sorry, Christian.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to call in. And in the meantime, all the Ortho Bros talk like this. They all they all are totally bought into tag as well. Again, I think they just learned this stuff from Jay. That's all I can assume. But maybe they were all independently coming to this. My big question is, I mean, I've never heard. Go ahead.
There's a secret conspiracy of ortho bros. Like they all literally have the same talking points, and they all are unified on doctrine because of this. And that is part of their 500-year plan to convert America, quite literally.
Okay, sounds about right. Well, that's one of my big questions. I mean, that's probably where I would start with, Jay, is I had never heard of presuppositional apologetics outside of really Reformed Presbyterian Van Tillian apologetics. Like Van Til was a Presbyterian who kind of, as I understand, came up with the whole apologetic method of presuppositionalism. So when I hear someone like Jay, who did come from a Van Tillian background, arguing for orthodoxy from this perspective, I'm like, is this something that you brought to orthodoxy, or are you saying that there has been this tradition of presuppositional apologetics within orthodoxy this whole time? I assume it's the first, but I don't know.
Athanasius used tag.
Right, exactly. Well, I don't know.
There's a book on tag. I'm just kidding.
So that's Reform Renegade says they copied it. That's my assumption as well, but I just don't know if he'd be willing to admit that. And maybe it's not true. I don't know. Maybe there is some, maybe he can point to this is actually how the fathers have always argued. I don't know. I mean, even Van Til basically said that about Calvin, and I think he was wrong. I think Calvin did not at all argue the same way that Van Til did. But
everybody tries to do that, though. They try and read back and be like, listen, I got this quote from Ignatius, therefore.
Now, I'm actually right. Calvin did actually argue very similar.
Well, Calvin did, yeah. He believed me what I believed.
Exactly.
Except he wouldn't be a Presbyterian today. But that's besides the point, bro.
Why would you say that?
I'm just saying. He probably wouldn't be. There's a few little, just a couple little problems.
All right. Well, he did have his falling out with John Knox, I guess. So in that regard, there is that. All right. Well, I don't have anything else. Do you guys got anything?
No, that was good. I mean, it was a logic stream, so I know that it's a little bit more tedious for people, as evidenced by Christian's facial expression throughout this stream. It's the most basic, boring building blocks of everything. So it's less flashy, it's less exciting, but I enjoy arguing over it.
Yeah, and it's really important. It is, like you said, the building block of all of our, argumentation in the colloquial sense. And people will try to use the terminology of strict logic to make illogical points all the time. And it's good to be, to know how to defend against those. So, yeah. And there we go. It's a good comment to end on. Appreciate you, Luke.
How dare you say that? Christian has been in my streams before. He has laughed many times in my streams, I'll have you know. Many wacky things get said on those things.
Alrighty. Yeah, well, good stuff. We'll be here next Sunday, if not before. I can't promise any surprise interweek streams, but I can't promise that they won't happen. I don't know. I have no epistemic certitude one way or the other.
There you go.
On that note, we should play it out with the I Invented Logic clip. And
I just switched it to the other one, dude. I almost hit end stream. With my outro from the other stream, which was an Erica remix. So maybe that wouldn't play well.
I will not stop screaming until you admit I invented logic.
There we go. Good night, gents.